Hello, I'm Joel.
And I'm Alex.
Welcome to the Commander's Journey, the place where we discuss the best format of Magic, Commander, from the perspective of a new player.
And an experienced one.
And just remember, we are here to help new players discover Commander. And today we want to talk about some of our favorite new cards in the set and some new commanders that we're really excited about building around in this brand new set coming out, the Throne of Eldraine.
And just so everyone listening, this is literally, the previews just came out. We are turning around and we are recording, so we have no external information, no nothing. We're just looking at this list and seeing what we're personally getting excited for.
Exactly, and so I think we both just, this is about a week or two before the Throne is actually released, and we just picked our top 5 cards, right? And then we went back and forth, and we're going to discuss them here.
Exactly, what cards spoke to us. So I'm going to start first with my number 5, my top 5. Card I picked was Embercleave. It's 4 generic mana, red and a red, for legendary artifact equipment. It has flash. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each attacking creature you control. When Embercleave enters the battlefield attached to target creature you control, the equipped creature gets +1/+1, has double strike and trample, and they equip for 3.
You need to take a breath there?
Yeah, exactly. No, it was a lot of words.
A lot of words.
Reading it but talking it, very different in there. But it's still doing a lot. So just so everyone knows, too, I picked this card. There's a number of cards I could have probably put in this 5th slot. I like, honestly, a lot of these legendary artifacts from this set. But I chose Embercleave. I think it's doing something a little more unique than a lot of them. Mm-hmm. So this one's like a combat trick, basically, where, you're going to do it. Basically, you're attacking with some stuff. They're going to declare balkers. You're really going to mess with that combat. So you can kind of instantly put it into play, instantly attach it to someone. If you're attacking with at least 4 things, you're only paying 2 mana for it. And then, at that point, you're probably, that creature's going to destroy whatever's blocking it. Or if nothing is,
Yeah, when I first looked at this card, I had to read it a few times to kind of get what it's trying to do, right? So for us newer players, it comes in, when it's got the text flash on it, and it's a creature, or if it's an enchantment or something, it's got flash on it. Think of it like an instant card, because that's how quickly it wants to work. And so the fact that if you're swinging with things, it just makes this thing cheaper, so you can just cheat it on something. And so it's not just an instant pump and goes away, it's an instant equipment that sticks to your creature too.
Exactly. So the decks that want this are decks with a lot of creatures. It's definitely decks that enjoy a combat trick, because this is basically a combat trick that sticks around. You can use it as if a one-time combat trick, but it's not really one time because it's staying there for now. And that creature has equipped. In fact, you can move it around for 3 mana, no problems. And then the other decks that want it are big equipment decks, stuff like that, where really it can go down. It's liking it being on the field, it cares about it, and again, this will make you win a combat definitely flat out as a surprise.
Definitely, and it's definitely something that red equipment would want to do, right? Just cheat it in there real quick, give it double strike, give it trample, give it 1/1. And
that double strike and trample, oh boy, that is doing a number. And I want to point out too, one of the reasons I picked this over the other legendary artifacts, I thought it was doing something a little unique. All of them are kind of doing something a little unique, but this one specifically, I'm really looking at and go, wow, that is different.
Yeah,
and I like that.
Yeah, sometimes equipment can almost seem boring. Like, oh, there's a piece of equipment, I can just stick it to something and it gives me a little effect. But this is like cheat the equipment and put it on and get all this cool stuff you want to do.
Well, exactly, too. And I definitely think if you have a good equipment deck as a newer player, that can be a very fun deck to play. For any player, it's a fun deck. But even for a newer player, the fact that it doesn't go anywhere when something goes wrong is really cool.
And especially if you love red, this is a great add in red in Commander specifically, because you don't usually use a lot of combat tricks, but something like this is very powerful. And powerful combat tricks are really cool.
This is the Commander's combat trick right here.
Exactly. Very, very good. Okay, so that was your number 5. My number 5 is Mirror Maid. It's a little less aggressive of a card, but I just think it's such a cool card. Had to look at it a few times. It's Mirror Maid. It's a blue and a blue for an enchantment. You may have Mirror Maid enter the battlefield as a copy of any artifact or enchantment on the battlefield. Now, the reason I picked this is hit my 5th slot is, especially for newer players like myself, you don't necessarily know all the different cards that people have. I swear every time I go play with my play group, I am experiencing just tons of new enchantments and artifacts and cards, and I'm having to ask people, what does that do? What does that do? And I thought this is not just a great card, but it's a great way to play other cards you don't have.
Yeah.
So I thought, like, if you pull out an enchantment I've never seen, and it's like, oh god, now you got all these cool effects, I can just pull Mirror Maid out, and now I got your card.
Well,
it's not really your card; it's a copy of your card. And I just thought that was pretty awesome.
No, and I like it too, just for the fact that especially if you're like in a color that can't do certain things, you can copy something in another person's color that's perchance doing that thing. So maybe you're in blue, you're having trouble ramping. You can copy that green ramp enchantment or something, and take advantage of that as well, which I think is very cool.
Exactly, because there's another artifact out there that's helping somebody else ramp. You got it now, or an enchantment that's helping. Maybe you need blockers or anything. It's very flexible because you can copy anything on the battlefield basically.
Honestly, worst case scenario, this becomes a soul ring and you have an extra soul ring.
Exactly. Yeah. There you go. That's a good one. Mirror Maid. That's my number 5.
There we go. So my number 4 is a little more of a specific deck archetype, but also would probably fall into a similar one as that deck. It's Emery, Lurker of the Loch. It's 2 and a blue for a legendary creature, Merfolk Wizard. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each artifact you control. When Emery, Lurker of the Loch enters the battlefield, put the top 4 cards of your graveyard into your library and tap it.
Choose target your library into your graveyard.
Or into your graveyard. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I get too excited for it. Choose target artifact card in your graveyard. You may cast that card this turn. It's a 1/2. Awesome. Now this one I really like. You're definitely wanting to play this in a blue artifact deck, but holy cow. Is this one really, you're grabbing that stuff out of the graveyard, and the fact it goes from your graveyard to play by just casting. You tap it, you can cast it straight from the graveyard. It really makes your artifacts difficult to deal with.
Yeah, so you tap Emery, you choose the artifact in your graveyard, and then you can just cast it this turn. That's it. So when it says you may cast it this turn, it just goes straight in. You don't have to pay the cost, do you?
You do have to pay
the cost.
You do have
to pay the cost.
So you do have to pay the cost. Exactly. It doesn't say, you get to pay without paying. It's paying its money. You still have to do it. But again, the fact that every single turn or every time you untap Emery, really, you get to play an artifact from your graveyard. So all those things that say destroy target artifact, you don't care about. They aren't really much of a setback. There may be a one-turn setback, and you're right back to where you started. They have to start exiling your stuff, which of course is a little on the expensive side in Commander.
Exactly. So if maybe you're playing a graveyard strategy and you use something like this, but also like you were just saying, like if somebody's sacking your cool artifacts or stuff you're putting out there, you're just gonna just bring them right back.
Well, exactly. It's great in artifact deck, great in a graveyard deck as well.
It's pretty awesome.
That's my number 4.
Okay. Going down the list, number 4 for me is Lochmere Serpent. It is 4 generic, a blue and a black, for a creature serpent. It has flash. There's that keyword again. For a blue, you can sacrifice an island, and Lochmere Serpent can't be blocked this turn. For a black, you can sacrifice a swamp, and you gain 1 life and draw a card. Or for a blue and a black, you can exile 5 target cards from an opponent's graveyard, return Lochmere Serpent from your graveyard to your hand, activate this ability only time you could cast a sorcery. This card is very powerful, and it's great. Oh, and it's a 7/7, thank you. And it's just great in Commander, because for the cost of basically 6, you're pulling out a 7/7. Just that by itself is a lot of value.
And in blue and black, too.
In blue and black, and you can pull it out at flash speed. And the one I was looking at is if I pulled this out at flash speed, say during a combat, for 4 blue and a black, and then I pay a blue and sacrifice an island, he can't be blocked this turn. So you can use it as a combat trick, right? Or if you need to the life gain and the draw on a card, you can do that. And then once this thing goes away, for whatever reason, if somebody removes it or if it dies in combat, you could activate this ability anytime you could cast a sorcery and bring it back for a blue and a black.
It's very powerful. I really like the fact it's 6 mana, 7/7 with flash. I will say, with the sacrifice the island thing, you have to do that. You'd really do that at the very start of combat as you're doing attackers, because otherwise that doesn't make any difference if you're in blocker's step or whatnot. But if they're attacking you, you could surprise block them. Or if, again, if you want to do it right after the main phase ends or at the start of your phase, you could do that and then turn around and attack with it. But again, you'd have to have something that gives it haste or something like that in that scenario as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So even if you flash it in, but you can flash it into block.
You could flash it in the block, which I think
Yeah.
is most likely what you're going to do. But even then, you could flash it at the end of your opponent's turn. So at the start of your turn, you don't have to worry about summoning sickness. And the other big thing I really like about this too, this pick, Joel, is the fact that, again, it comes right back. You're going to have to deal with this no matter what. This is always something that you're going to have in your repertoire until they exile it.
Exactly. I mean, it's such a cheap cost to get it back to your hand. A blue and a black to put a 7/7 back in your hand.
Exactly.
That's
And
pretty
imagine
powerful.
this in something like Muldrotha, where those sacrifice an island, sacrifice a swamp. You can play a turn, play that swamp again, turn around, play that again. And all of a sudden you're just basically every turn you get to draw an additional card and gain a life. Not even lose life, gain a life, which is a newer thing they're pushing in black. I really like that.
That's pretty awesome. That's pretty good.
And don't forget, newer players too, you can tap that black mana and sacrifice the swamp you just used to tap that mana with. So that way it can be, you don't have to do 2 separate mana there. You could tap that swamp for black mana, sacrifice that swamp you just tapped, and then get the effect.
Exactly. That way you're not. Yeah.
You're not losing 2 things out of it. It doesn't matter if it's tapped or not, the swamp you're sacrificing, you just have to sacrifice it.
Exactly. That's something I had to learn early on too. I wasn't quite sure when I first started playing. Anytime you're sacrificing something, or like a bounce land or something, you want to sacrifice or bounce something that's already tapped. So get the value out of it first during your turn, then sacrifice it or whatever you need to do.
It's perfect. On to number 3. So my number 3 pick is one I'm very excited for. It's Questing Beast. It's 2 green and a green legendary creature beast. And stay with me while I go through this. It's Vigilance, Death Touch, Haste. Oh boy. Questing Beasts can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. Combat damage that would be dealt by creatures you control can't be prevented. Whenever Questing Beast deals combat damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to target planeswalker that player controls. It's a 4/4. So that last bit of text is going to be a cool when it happens kind of thing. But I really like is it's a fantastic rate 4 for 4/4. It has Vigilance, Death Touch, and Haste. It can't be blocked, can't be chump blocked very easily. But the biggest thing is the fact that combat damage that would be dealt by creatures you control can't be prevented.
Yeah.
Why it's so good is, maybe I'm playing a deck and I have protection from green, Joel. If my opponent has a Questing Beast, I have something with protection from green. Guess what? Protection is a type of damage prevention. So if you have something that is protection from green, I swing with my stuff. Guess what? It doesn't really have protection from green anymore. Damage cannot be prevented.
So combat damage that would not be dealt by creatures you control. Wait, combat damage that would be dealt by creatures, that's all your creatures
All
you
my
control,
creatures.
can't be prevented. So somebody else has that. I want to flesh this out for us new players. There are cards out there that say, you have protection from white or green, or you choose a color you have protection from. There's always ways to kind of get around that, and this is one of those ways where when Questing Beast is out, basically combat damage that would be dealt by creatures you control can't be prevented. So that it's almost like it negates.
It negates it. Now, it does work on stuff that lowers that damage to 0, but it does not work against things that say, damage, prevent that damage, or in this case, protection, which is the most common way you're going to see it. Protection from green and Questing Beast does, or if you're playing a multicolored deck, protection from what other colors you have. You swing in with your stuff, they'll block it, but you're doing full damage to them. Because this card's out, it does not care what protection it has on.
So, it almost seems like an add to any mono green deck, because like if somebody else is, especially in your play group, they know you're playing mono green and they got that little card and it gives them protection from green. This is one of those ways to get around that.
Honestly, I like this in any creature deck, any deck where you can even justify it a little bit, where you're trying to win with that creature combat damage. I highly recommend this card, or at least have it in the conversation of what deck you're building.
Man, it doesn't even need all that text. Just a 4 for a 4/4 with Vigilance, Death Touch, and Haste would have been enough.
That's what I'm saying. It just gets better, and it just has bonuses like, when I deal damage, you I'll also take out your planeswalker. I don't even have to pick.
I'm pretty sure the Wizards were thinking of Commander when they created this one.
I think so. You can make this to your commander as well. I was thinking of it more in the 99, but it is a legendary creature.
It is a legendary creature.
You could build around it.
Yeah. You can build around, and then nobody can protect themselves from green.
Nope. You are going to deal that damage whether they like it or not.
All right, my number 3. Let me say her name correctly now. Ayara, First of Lochthwain. It's 3 black For a legendary creature, Elf Noble. Whenever Ayara, First of Locthwain, or another black creature enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And you can tap it to sacrifice another black creature and draw a card, and it's a 2/3. I love the whole. I love black. I love sacrifice effects, and this is just one of those ways. In either mono black, or maybe you're playing a black white Orzhov type deck, and you're sacrificing things. But every time you sacrifice, you get to draw a card. That's the text on this card that really got me going. The whole lose 1 life, gain 1 life is also really good if you're playing that type of strategy. But just the fact that you got this ability to both be a sack outlet and draw a card on a legendary creature like Ayara. I mean, you can make her your commander, and you always have a sacrifice outlet. So you can use a sacrifice strategy and be drawing cards. It's like an engine almost. So I really like this card.
No, I think it's a fantastic pick, and exactly for what you said. The drawback is it has to be a black creature, but you don't lose life when you do that. And most cards up until now it does that. So this is really standing out from that. I would have, if you didn't pick her, I probably would have, to be honest.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's great for like a mono black commander too. I didn't pick her as the commander I'd want to build around, but Ayara, man, for 3 black, it's inexpensive. It's got the sacrifice and the card draw pasted right onto her. And the lose life will gain life. So it's that entire strategy that black wants to do.
Yeah.
It's very classic black right there. It's just a great card.
It's so exciting.
Oh, yeah. I kind of like the extra text on there. Morning shifts seamlessly to celebration as she chooses her next suitor.
You know, there's some fantastic conversations around these cards. With my number 4 tick, Emery, Lurker of the Loch, I was reminded on Mythic Spoiler by, I couldn't find the person's name before we started, but someone posted online the joke in Monty Python where the guy goes, weird women out of lake should not be a suitable choice for, passing down lineage. I forget the exact quote. I'm butchering it, but it's really hilarious. You're sitting there going like, it's exactly what I'm thinking too with that. It's just this set's great for that. Holy cow!
I love the extra. Yeah, it's such good storytelling. I think these characters, they just got so much story around them. I love this. I love that text though. The morning shifts seamlessly to celebration. As she chooses her next suitor. It's very like she's a Black Widow. Now she's going to celebrate again. In the morning, as in MOURNING, she's sad.
Yeah, she's
from sadness to celebration.
But you could even read it the other way. It still works, as a morning, like it's a time of day. It's not, but that's what I'm saying. It's really what's well-made flavor text, that's for sure.
Okay, anyway, Ayara, my number 3 pick for sure.
So here's my number 2, and I cheated a bit. Honestly, I really like the lands in the set. That's the other really big set, the legendary artifacts and the lands.
Cheated.
I love the lands. I could not sort on. And there's a couple other lands, honestly. If we had like maybe a 6th and 7th slot, I might have thrown them in there too. But I chose a whole cycle as my number 2. My number 2 is the whole castle cycle.
So
I don't want to say
that's
there's
five lands.
I picked 5 as my number 2. I know
castles.
I'm bad. I'm just going to pick one to choose the text of. And one of the ones I'm really liking, let's look at the green one.
Mm-hmm. Always green, right?
Always the green one. Actually, I'm not much of a green player anyways, too, so it's kind of funny. But this is just a good example of why I like this cycle so much. So this one is Castle Garenbrig. It's a land that says Castle Garenbrig enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a forest. Tap, add green. 2 green and a green. Tap, add 6 green. Spend this mana only to cast creature spells or activate abilities of creatures. So this... if you're playing anything 3 color or lower, or maybe even 2 color and lower, depending on how you want to stretch that mana base, any scenario where you have the forest subline on dual lands, on your basic lands or whatever you happen to be using, worst case scenario, this comes into play tapped. There is easily most of the time you're going to play a forest first, then you're going to play this card. It comes into play untapped, and the second in this scenario you hit 5 mana, you really have 6 mana. The second, with a lot of these ones, it's just an extra added bonus that is basically a freebie. So I would treat this like, something, I'd almost slot this in. Again, any 2 color deck, I would slot both of the colors, castles in those decks. unless it's doing something to the antithesis of what you're trying to do in the deck. Like if I had a green spells deck, I probably wouldn't play this. But otherwise, in most your green spells are going to be creature decks. 90% of the time, I'd say I would want to add this to my mana suite for any dual color decks, monocolored decks especially, and maybe even 3-color, depending on how I'm going with those decks.
Yeah, it's just an easy ramp land. I mean, like you just said, once you get to 5 lands, you 2 and 2 green, and you tap Castle Garenbrig, and you're getting that 6 mana for free. It's
Exactly.
Just,
And they all do something like that that's powerful. Now, some I think are more powerful than others. Like, I think the black one's also extremely powerful. The blue one's just fine. The red one's just fine. The white one's, fine. I think they're all good and all worth playing in any kind of deck where it makes sense to have that effect. And again, most decks are happy getting a free whatever bonus on with a 1/2. And again, worst case scenario, it's a tap land. You probably don't want it that way, but that's the worst.
It'll
case
be
scenario.
that way a few times in Commander, just because we have so many. Besides basic lands, you also have a lot of utility lands. That's the way the game's played, and so sometimes you'll have to bring it in tap, but most of the time I don't think you will, and then you're getting a land out of it. Plus, you have that extra value on the
Exactly.
land.
And the fact you only need one in play, and again, it can be a dual land. As long as it has that subtype in there, that's what matters, and that's really exciting.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. All right, so you didn't really choose 5; you just chose 1.
We talked about one. I picked all 5 though. I mean, I could have used Castle Lockpoint as the answer, Castle Ardenvale, any of them.
So the Castle cycle is
the
your
whole
number
Castle
2.
cycle. I'm cheating.
All right, I'm not going to cheat with my number 2. I'm going to pick a really freaking good card here. I just love it. Here, we're in green again. There's so many awesome cards in green.
Yes.
This is the Great Henge for 7, a forest and a forest. It's a legendary artifact. This spell costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. You tap it to add 2 green, you gain 2 life. And whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on it and draw a card. So in any creature deck where you have just powerful creatures, which a lot of green decks want to have, most of the time you're not going to be paying 9 mana for this. You're going to be paying maybe 3-4 mana for this. It's going to come out, and you got an artifact that you can tap it for 2 force and gain life. And then the really powerful part of this is whenever a non-token creature, again a non-token creature type deck, enters the battlefield under your control, you put a 1/1 counter and draw a card. So every time you're dropping creatures, you're getting counters on it, you're getting cards, you're getting counters, you're getting cards. I just think it's a really awesome artifact in green.
This is a ramp monorock in play. This is a card draw spell. This is pumping your creatures, and I think you don't want to play this if you can only get, you're paying 9 mana for it. You don't want to pay it even if I think you can drop it down by 2. I think around 5 mana total is that line of good enough. And then after that, it gets better and better and better.
Well, in a lot of green decks, you're going to have at least maybe a 4/4 out there. There's a lot of green powerful creatures, right? And if it's just a 4/4, now you're paying 5, which would probably be the most you pay for. Right?
That's what I'm saying, and that's the line in my head of where I think this goes from. I'm stuck playing it for a higher cost versus wow, this card, And again, that's like about paying for what I think it's worth is about 5 mana. And then when it gets 4 mana, holy cow, is that getting cheaper? And then 3, and then when it gets to 2, you feel like
you could potentially put this out for free. I mean, if you got a
no matter what
for 9, you got to pay 1.
Yes,
right?
you have to pay 2 no matter what.
Or
you still
2.
have the 2 colored mana no matter what you do. But if you have a 7-powered creature, which is again completely doable in green, especially in those big creature decks, this is what you're looking at. But again, even if you have a decent amount of 4/4s or 5/5s or wherever you're at that line, this is totally still worth playing.
Well, it's a good thing to note for us newer players because that's always a hard thing to understand is all the X spells. I see like X for XX, and I'm like, what is X? X doesn't mean anything to me. Okay, so as I'm learning this, so I said that incorrectly, but this says this spell costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control, and it's 7 generic and 2 green. So no matter what, you have to pay 2 green.
Yes.
So if you have a 7/7 out there, that basically makes the Great Henge only paying 2 green. But then you're getting an artifact where you can tap it for 2 green.
Well, exactly right. That's what I'm saying. No matter what,
it's just a great card.
I mean, literally, if you can pay it for 7 minus, it pays for itself. Just outside, you can immediately play it and tap it for that 2 green. It's a really good card.
All right. Okay. Now to your number one.
So my number one. My number one.
Sorry, that was my attempt at like
the drum roll.
doing a drum roll on the back of my chair.
So this, I honestly think, is gonna be this is me again. Before anything's come out, I think this will be the most expensive card in the set because the Commander player community specifically is gonna want this. I literally want this card in every single dual colored or higher deck I can put it in. And you're not going to be able to because it's going to shoot up in price. But the card I picked is Fabled Passage. It's land, tap, sacrifice Fabled Passage. Search your library for a basic land card. Put it onto the battlefield tap, then shuffle your library. Then if you control 4 or more lands, untap that land. So basically what this is a better Evolving Wilds. They just did Prismatic Vista, I believe is what it's called, from Modern Horizons, which this can be argued against if that's better or if this is better. That one always comes into play in tap, but you have to pay a life to use, which probably means that one's better. But I could see myself playing both these very easily, especially in a multicolored deck. And this one has you without paying the extra life. That can come into play if you're playing it later in the game. So this has one of those cards that early game will be exactly what you have as an Evolving Wilds, where it comes into play. You tap it, you get your basic land. You're exactly where you were if you had an Evolving Wilds in the deck. But in the later part of the game, it becomes any basic land you need it to be.
At that point.
So
after having 4 lands down, if you still find yourself
this
in a
can be the
situation
fourth
where
land.
you need to fix your colors,
Yeah.
this is the perfect card for that.
And this is one of those ones. So definitely more multicolored decks. Monocolored decks, I don't think it's necessarily worth playing. But in the multicolored decks, even a 2-color deck potentially, if you have the money or the budget, whatever, to put this in the deck, it's going to still see use there. It's going to come in handy. And again, this can be the 4th land. It says 4 or more lands. So it can be turn 4 coming in and getting that value.
Yeah, and for all those, especially 3-4 color commanders, where you're definitely gonna have 3 or 4 lands down and be, I need that one color.
Yes.
And that's where when I was first started playing the game, I had to learn cards like Evolving Wilds and cards like this, Fable Passage, are very powerful in that way. Because if you you only have so many land slots. You add so many of 3 or 4 different colors in your slots. But if you have these utility lands like this that basically come in, you tap it, you get rid of it. You're like, well, how does that make it powerful? Well, you can go and search for whatever color you need at that point in the game. So the fact that this is Evolving Wilds, but better because potentially, like you said, that land doesn't stay untapped. You can use it that turn.
Yes.
Use it that turn.
Exactly. So it's just Evolving Wilds with upside. Again, if you can't afford this in every deck, God knows I'm not going to be able to. Don't worry about it. Evolving Wilds is still a great card. Terramorphic Expanse, which does exactly the same thing, is also a great card. It just doesn't have that potential upside. So where you can fit this in, I definitely do recommend it.
Well,
it's
already up there.
It's already up there, and I honestly think it's going to go up. Maybe it'll drop down right when the set
Buy
releases.
a box, cross your fingers that you open 3 of them.
Exactly. That's a good box if you open 3 of them. Throwing that out there, and honestly, hold on. I think they're going to go in price. Don't trust my magic money advice, but I really think it's going to go up in price.
Well, it seems like it's just going to become another commander staple for sure.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. In fact, I think in a lot of decks, people might just replace it for Evolving Wilds. Just pull that out
I
and put Fabled Passage in
literally
instead.
will, or potentially again have both if I feel like I need both.
Exactly. Yeah, especially for those 4 or 5 color decks where you need that color.
Even 3-color decks. Holy cow!
So you heard it here first. Fabled Passage.
That's my
one of the
number
new
one
commander
pick.
staples.
Yeah, number one. I don't think I'm wrong on that. I'm 100% sure. I'm not even.
Alex feels
I'm
pretty darn
really confident in this.
Okay, now my number 1 pick. I'm excited about this card.
There you go.
I really like this card, and I'll tell you why it's my favorite after I read it. It is a Planeswalker, and I might be biased because the first box I ever opened was War of the Spark, and I like Planeswalkers. But it's Oko, Thief of Crowns. For 1, a green and a blue, it's a legendary Planeswalker, Oko. His +2 ability is create a food token. His +1 ability is target artifact or creature loses all abilities and becomes a green elf creature with base power and toughness 3/3. And his -5 is exchange control of target artifact or creature you control and target creature an opponent controls with power 3 or less. And he comes with 4 loyalty. Now, the reason I love this card so much is not so much the fact that you can create food tokens, because that's kind of a cool new thing. Yeah, whatever. We don't know exactly what food tokens are yet, but we're going to have fun with those. But that next ability, that +1, is target artifact or creature loses all abilities and becomes a green elf creature with base power, toughness 3/3. There are a lot of commanders in the game of Commander that you're playing against that if you exile it, it goes to the command zone. If you board wipe, it goes to the command zone. Or they put it back in their hand. There's so many. This is, to me, is one of the coolest ways to deal with the commander because you're not getting rid of it, and it's not an enchantment. So sometimes when you enchant something and turn it into a 3/3 or whatever, and make it base power and lose all its abilities, you can use your enchantment removal to kind of deal with it. But this is an ability on a planeswalker. So basically what it does is, I turn your Gashath into a 3/3. That can't do anything, right, from your Gashath deck.
Yes.
How are you going to deal with that?
I can't. I legitimately
You'd have to,
cannot.
you'd have to kill your own thing somehow.
Yes.
You'd have to literally kill. You couldn't just enchant removal. I think in Commander, it's a great way to deal with a powerful card on the other side of the board that's giving you problems. And you can do it on your first drop, right? Because you have priority as a planeswalker comes into play.
Yes.
Use your +1, deal with that thing.
If they're not countering it, you're going to get that ability off.
And if you just do that, you're at +5. Now look at his -5. The very next turn, if you decided to, you can exchange control of an artifact or creature you have for a target creature an opponent has. You can steal another commander. So the way I was looking at this card was, I'm going to turn your commander, Alex, into a little 3/3, and then the next turn I'm going to steal Robert's commander. Another one person in our play group, but just like, I'm going to kill your commanders. I just think it's a really cool card if it can stick around. Oko, Thief of Crowns.
I definitely think you're going to use that +1 more than anything else. I mean, I think it will come up the exchange control, and honestly, there's some pretty powerful stuff you could probably do on that end. Kind of playing around it might be a little hard, but I really do think this card is powerful. Specifically, as you said, you can just take out their commander. What are they going to do? It has no abilities, has no text. They have to destroy it. That's their only option. They're literally wasting one of their removal spells on their own thing. Now, against a sacrifice deck, that doesn't affect them too badly, but every other type of deck is going to struggle against this card.
I was just thinking of it right now. If you had Oath of Teferi out and you play this deck, that's
Yes.
the Oath where it allows you to play 2 Planeswalker abilities. You can, in the same turn somebody's commander into a 3/3 and then steal another creature or something else that somebody else has.
Yes.
All in the same play. And then you don't care what happens to it afterwards. Somebody can sack it the next turn.
Oh, exactly.
You've already done your damage.
It's
all for a 3-drop.
Oh, God. Definitely a powerful top pick.
All right. Well, that's my number 1 pick. That's my favorite right there.
Awesome.
All right. And then, we wanted to talk about some of the new commanders in the set that we're really excited to build around,
so
too.
what we're going to do every single time, we're going to take a look at the commanders in the set and say, not necessarily we're going to build them, but what commander interests us the most to build.
Yes.
And this is a personal opinion. This is not the best commander in the set. This is not even that commander. It's what us personally are like, hey, this is the one I'm most interested to buy, and maybe name a couple cards that go with it. So I will start. It's Sir Gwen, Hero of Ashvale. 3 red, white, and black for a legendary creature, Human Knight. Vigilance Menace. Whenever an equipped creature you control attacks, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. Equipment you control have Equipped Knight 0. It's a 5/5. Now, this is one of the Brawl commanders. Yep. This one is probably the weakest of the Brawl decks out of the box. That's not what I'm looking at it at. I'm looking at this because I've never had a Mardu deck, which is the name of the 3-color combination. Never had it before. I've always kind of wanted an equipment deck. This allows me to build an equipment deck, and I've always kind of wanted a knight deck. So this is kind of hitting a lot of notes for me. The only downfall I see to this deck, the commander's a little expensive in a non-mono ramp colors, but I think I take that as a challenge and not a drawback even, just something fun to build around.
Exactly. It's a pretty cool legendary creature. The fact that you can equip meant that you control have Equipped Knight 0. So if you make a knight deck out of this, you look for all those really cool expensive equipments, and with the commander out, you don't have to pay that equipment cost. You can just Move your equipment around and
Exactly, and you double down on attacking, you double down on equipment and knights, and you just really got to think about ramp too. So this deck's going to be trying to do a lot. I don't know if I'm going to build it or not, but I'm definitely looking at ways to potentially do that.
okay, and some cool cards that go with that.
Yeah, so I try to pick ones that I haven't seen as many people references, and honestly, it's probably in most of their decks. I just haven't done enough looking into. One of the ones that stood out to me was Pure Steel Paladin. It's white and a white for a creature human knight. Whenever an equipment enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card, and it has Metalcraft, which means equipment you control have 0 to equip as long as you control 3 or more artifacts. It's a 2/2. So this is hitting multiple notes. It's a knight. Mm-hmm. When I get to draw additional cards when equipment enters the battlefield, which is the other thing I really care about.
Yep.
And then it's an extra redundant bonus effect. So if my commander's not out, which again, it's such a big cost, chances are it's going to be a little later in the game before I get my commander out. Mm-hmm. This can supplement my game strategy before my commander gets out.
Having multiple ways to do the same strategy is good because you don't always draw every card in your deck, and it's hard to always keep the commander in play.
Exactly. So that way they have to deal with multiple things to get rid of that equip at 0 cost. And the other one I want to do, because again, I really need ramp in this deck. Here's one of my go-to ramp cards. It's colorless, and I really enjoy this equipment, which is why it's in the deck. Mm-hmm. Is Sword of the Animist. It's 2 colorless for legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1, but whenever equipped creature attacks, you may search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library equipped for 2. Mm-hmm. Powerful equipment. I don't really care so much about the +1/+1, but the main thing is when it attacks, I get to search for land. Not when it deals combat damage, not when, it's when it attacks. Off the attack trigger, I'm ramping.
And you just put it right in the battlefield. So it's like at the end of each attack phase, you're dropping an extra land, which is
as long as I'm swinging, I'm ramping, and that's what the deck wants to do.
Which you definitely need in red, white, and black, which are weaker on the.
Those are the weak colors, yes.
Definitely
the ones we're working around.
So Sword of the Animist for sure. Okay, so the commander I was excited to build around. I don't know. I think I might end up building this deck eventually.
It's a fun one.
Because I'm still low on decks, and this is a cool one. And again, it's green. It's Yorvo, Lord of Garenbrig. It's 3 green for a legendary creature, Giant Noble. Yorvo, Lord of Garenbrig enters the battlefield with 4 +1/+1 counters on it. Whenever another green creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Yorvo. Then, if that creature's power is greater than Yorvo's power, put another +1/+1 counter on Yorvo, and he comes in as a 0/0. But he enters the battlefield with 4 +1/+1 counters on it. I did want to make a quick note. It doesn't say when Yorvo enters the battlefield. It just says Yorvo enters the battlefield with. So you can't use like a double ETB type effect on this. That first part right there. But Yorvo, he enters the battlefield with that. So he's always coming in as a 4/4. And now, if you build your deck with the idea of just dropping more creatures every time you do, it'll be in green because it's mono green. You're just pumping up Yorvo. So I was like, how would we take advantage of that? And I thought, well, if you make a token deck and you're dropping tons and tons of creatures at a time, where it's making multiple creatures, even if they're a bunch of 1/1s, right? But every time you do that, if there's like you're dropping 2 or 4 or 8 tokens, you're pumping your commander at the same time in that same way. And just 2 cards that I thought would go really good in the deck. One is Primal Vigor. It's 4 and a green for an enchantment. It says if 1 or more tokens will be put onto the battlefield, twice that many of those tokens are put on the battlefield instead. And then also says if 1 or more +1/+1 counters will be placed on a creature, twice that many +1/+1 counters are placed on that creature instead. I just think this card synergizes so well with the strategy I was just talking about, where if you sit down and you just drop 4 tokens, Primal Vigor is going to turn that into 8 tokens, which makes your commander pump up by 8, or you add 8 counters onto him. And then if 1 or more counters will be placed, you double that. So you double that 8 to 16 now. So for dropping 4 tokens, does that work like that?
So if you're dropping 4 tokens, you would get 2 +1/+1 counters per token. So you get 8 total. It wouldn't double it to 16 because it's a replacement effect. So you would jump up to, if you're doing with 4, you jump up to 8. And then,
And then read,
Yeah.
and then
That would be
then
8.
Yorville says whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1 counter.
Yeah, so
Right.
you'd get 8 tokens, or 8 +1/+1 counters, out of the 4 tokens.
But the second part says if 1 or more counters would be placed on a creature,
Place double it.
double that.
So everything whenever something gets placed with a plus, or any of those tokens comes into play, Yorville's going to get the +1/+1 counter he makes, and then Primal Vigor is going to double it. So every single time that it comes into play, you'll get 2. Now, if they have more power and toughness than Yorvo, you're going to get 4 for each of those. But if it's that which case that would be, instead of 8, you would be getting 16, because you'd be getting 4 each time one comes into play. But if they're the same or lower, then you're going to get 8 total.
It's pretty nuts right there.
Yes.
Yep. So it's just an enchantment that works really good with Yorvo. In any way you can make, I think you can just drop as many green creatures at a time. You can just pump him up really fast.
Well, exactly, right?
And then another card that I thought would be awesome is just one of the few, because in your mono green board wipes that green has, it just works so well with them, is Azuri's Predation, which is 5, a green for a sorcery. It says for each creature your opponents control, put a 4/4 green beast creature token onto the battlefield. Each of those beasts fights a different one of those creatures. So typically this is going to wipe a good amount of the board, because there's a lot of creatures that are either 4 or less. So if there's 10 other creatures out there and you're dropping these green beast creatures to fight them, even if you don't wipe the whole board, you wipe the majority of the board. If you drop 10, you just pumped Yorvo by 10. And you've
Yes.
wiped a bunch of the board. So it's just, for board wipes, synergizing with their commander, that's a really good one right there.
This is definitely that ideal synergy that you're looking for in your board wipes, too. It's really very powerful.
Anyway, it just seems like a lot of fun. Yorvo seems like one of those new commanders. I don't really have any mono commanders, so I just thought it'd be kind of fun.
And what is nice, starting with mono green, is I think mono green and mono black, they can often get around a lot of their own weaknesses easier than the other colors can. There's ways, and they're getting more and better about the ways to do it, but especially green, more than any of the other colors, I think does the better job of covering its own weaknesses.
Yeah, there's a lot of powerful cards in green, as we've discovered, even just some of the ones we talked about today, some of the new ones. But
Okay, so now it's time to take the extra step. So for us, our extra step this episode, we are going to talk about 2 sleeper picks. So again, this is before the set has come out. No one's really talking about it. So who knows, maybe this is a sleeper in our heads or for a day. And turns out everyone's figured out exactly what we think is going to happen. And it's not much of a sleeper at all. But we're going to talk about sleepers as cards that are going to be underestimated when they come out. And then as the set goes on, or as more sets come out and stuff comes out, this will get better and better in terms of cards for the set.
so I found this difficult to find a sleeper, specifically for Commander. There was another card I thought it was an awesome sleeper for limited type of formats, but this card I think has a lot of potential, especially if food tokens take off. So my sleeper is Trail of Crumbs. It's 1 and a green for an enchantment. It says when Trail of Crumbs enters the battlefield, you create a food token. Okay, that's good. There's a lot of ways to make food tokens in this set. But the second part is where I think it really becomes a powerful enchantment. It says whenever you sacrifice a food, you may pay 1 generic. If you do, look at the top 2 cards of your library. You may reveal a permanent card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. And I just think it kind of, there's some ways in green, as we were talking about earlier, where you can scry and draw cards, but it kind of, that is a little bit more like blues type of thing to do. So I think in green, this is really awesome. If you do end up having a deck where you're creating a lot of food tokens, because there's other ways to use it where you can use it for life gain or card draw. But with this enchantment, you're using it to kind of cycle through your deck and draw your deck. And I just think it can really get out of control if somebody's using food tokens in that way. pulling them out to try and either draw cards or just create an engine where you have these things on the field and you can use them for life gain if you want, but you're really just using those tokens to sift through your deck quickly.
And I want to point out too that even though I don't think there's quite enough food tokens in play based on this set alone, treasure tokens took off in multiple sets. That's becoming more of a standard thing. So treasure tokens, are going to be seen more and more. And I know they were happy with clue tokens. We haven't seen them again since Innistrad, but I know you weren't around for that set. But
I was not.
They were very popular. I think they're going to do them again because they were so popular. I could imagine easily food going the same way.
It could, and again, this is from the opinion of a brand new player just started this year. But it's kind of an out there prediction. But I think if food tokens take off and people really find cool ways to use them and utilize them in their strategy, I think this card, because there's green in a lot of commander decks anyway. So this is just one of those cool cards. If you are using food tokens, like you would use treasure tokens a lot, maybe in a deck, maybe now you're starting to use food tokens more. This is just one of those really powerful, underrated cards because you could just sack it. You can pay one. You can look at the top 2 cards, reveal, put one in your hand, put one on the bottom, or don't. Like you can just do so much with it. Kind of cycle through. Through a deck. So say, especially if you're like say in green and red, and you don't have that ability because blue usually is the way you scry or you draw, or you have a little bit more in black and other colors. But in green now, with that little shenanigan, you can really cycle through pretty quickly.
I definitely think this will be more of the sleeper and non-sleepers, but I definitely think, Joel, you'll be staying true to the sleeper mantra where it's not going to be on anyone's radar. Then all of a sudden, some great food commander is going to come out, and oh boy, is everyone going to, start building a bunch of food decks, and we'll see what happens in 2 years. You might be turn around, Joel, and be like, "Look at that Trail of Crumbs! I called it 2 years ago. This is the card." And I think you're dead on. If food becomes a thing, I think this will be one of the go-to cards in that strategy because there's only really one big legendary creature that uses food, which I think is the one that. It's like the Ogre King or something. I don't remember. We should have the set list in front of us. But it's that one that would be the only one I could imagine you right now building a deck with Food of Mine that you could do. But again, this you're going to definitely play in that deck without a doubt. And then it'll get more and more powerful as more food token cards get printed.
And looking through the set, it was more the Golgari colors, the black and green, that had a lot of ways to abuse food tokens. And maybe they'll give us more ways with new sets how to abuse food tokens. Especially if everybody goes on to Arena and plays it and really likes it and uses it. I think the Wizards will definitely take notice of that. But if food tokens take off, my prediction is this will be a staple.
Without a doubt.
Food tokens.
Completely agree.
Probably go up in price too. Don't take my financial advice. I don't.
No. It's an uncommon. It's never going to get too bad.
We'll
see.
That.
I mean, food tokens really have to take off for it to be bad. I wouldn't go that far. Like, not like I am. I'm making the call with the fabled, the land, the better Evolving Wilds Fabled Passage. Yes, I'm making the call with that one. That is only going to go up in price. It might see a downshift right as the set comes out, and then right after that, it's going to like that one.
Yeah,
really think is going to go up in price. Don't take my word on it. Again, not a financial guy, but I really think so.
Yeah.
The other one I don't think will be as bad. But anyways, my sleeper pick is the Fires of Invention. It's 3 and a red for an enchantment. You may cast spells only during your turn, and you can cast no more than 2 spells each turn. Can't say I like that, Joel. But the second part, you may cast spells with converted mana costs less than or equal to the number of lands you control without paying their mana cost. So I can cast 2 spells for free on each of my turns, as long as I have enough mana that in theory I could have paid for them.
Exactly. So if you basically had 10 mana up, you can play 2 spells that cost 10 each, basically, right? So up to that number. But yeah, it is definitely a ramp in red.
It is ramp in red. It is definitely one of those cards that, it basically doubles your mana in red if you want to look at it that way. It does come with a red drawback where you can only cast on your turn, so no more instant speed, and you can only do 2 spells each turn, which is definitely a drawback. But first, if someone removes this card, you can, you got to pay 2 things for free, then they get rid of it, and then, oh my god, you're good to do whatever you want to do. You still have all your mana open. But really where you want to play this is a creature heavy deck. Something, where your creatures want to attack, haste, a lot of haste in your deck, where you want to do stuff only on your turn and you want to be swinging in with the biggest possible things. There are definitely decks out there that want to do that.
And for newer players, I think there's ways to. I think somebody smarter and more experienced needs to figure out how to break this card a little, and I think there are ways to do it. I couldn't figure it out, but I think one of the key things to pay attention to is that first part says you can cast spells only during your turn, and you can cast no more than 2 spells. So there are other ways to cheat cards into the battlefield, right?
Yes, there are ways to do it. There are ways where you don't have to worry about it. I know one of the things me and Joel were talking about, because I do have a Geshath deck, which is a dinosaur deck. It's very fun. But, when he uses his ability to put cards into play, you're not casting those. Those just go into play. So they avoid that restriction. There are a lot of other cards that avoid those restrictions as well that you could build around.
So if you can find powerful cards, cheat their mana cost with this spell, or basically it's almost like doubling. Anyway, getting like big creatures out there that drop, and then finding ways to, because you cast those, but you find ways to cheat other cards in the field, then you're not restricted by that first part, and Fires of Invention becomes that much better.
So the long and short of it is, don't play this in every red deck. Keep it in mind if you're going to put it in the deck to build your deck a certain way. There are decks that definitely want this, and if you have one of those decks and you can really abuse this, it's going to be one of your powerhouse cards in those decks.
Awesome. All right, well, that does it. Those are our top 5. Those are the commanders we're really stoked about looking at building around, and some of our sleepers. We hope everybody got a lot out of this episode, and especially if you're new to the format, we're here for you. We want to talk about all the cool new ways we can abuse these cards in our commander decks.
It's very exciting. I already pre-ordered a box for better or for worse.
All right.
I think I made the right choice.
I think we might open some of those packs and play them next week or something. For sure. All right. Well, until next time.
See you.